hang on, I have to give permissions. 1 second.
Okay. Sweet, and we are recording.
That's okay. Okay, so it's saying I'm going to have to rejoin, but I will be right back. I'm going to reload. Okay. And sorry.
Oh, no worries. Take your time.
Can you see it now?
Almost. There we go.
Yes.
All right. Cool.
Awesome. So thank you, everyone, for joining today. We got a couple things on the agenda, and time permitting, I'm sure we can get a couple of other things on there. Today, we're going to start with George, who's going to present some results of a survey study. And yeah, really excited to hear all about it. If you want to give us an intro and dive right in, we're excited to hear about what you have to present.
Sure. Thanks so much, Amir. So George Siniowski, I'm a senior technologist at In-Q-Tel Labs, and today I'm going to summarize the Secure Code Reuse survey that John Speed and I and several colleagues recently conducted. Today's talk has 3 components. I'll start with just a quick background on our approach, then I'll give you a demographic baseline on the highly educated Python-reliant cohort that took the survey. And then I'll highlight just a couple of our key results that I was asked to highlight for you. I should note there is a blog post coming out on this in a couple of weeks. So if anything you hear today interests you, we will be elaborating on that. And then, of course, we'll take questions at the end. So just a brief item on our motivation and methodology, the why and the how of the survey. We at In-Q-Tel Labs think that Ken Thompson's 1984 Reflections on Trusting Trust, which is all about trust-based code reuse, is a great starting point for where we are today, even though it wasn't written in the Git era or the era of package managers. There are annual developer surveys, as everyone on this call is familiar with. But the problem in our view is they only ask very few questions related to security, related to package reuse and software evaluation criteria. And so we saw a gap in the data, and we saw an opportunity to survey the developer attitudes, going beyond salary data and IDE preferences. That kind of information is certainly helpful. It just doesn't tell us very much about security. So a couple months ago, my colleagues and I developed an 18-item online questionnaire on SurveyMonkey. We had some academic partners. I know Frank Nagel of Harvard Business School sometimes joins these calls. He was one of the people who looked at the survey. We had helpful feedback from just a variety of constituencies. And in the end, we took a convenience sample of 150 data scientists, software developers, web developers, people with similar job titles, and we recruited them via personal and professional networks. And just one last note before I get into the the demographic baseline and the results. We designed the survey to allow for cross-comparison with some of the RedMonk, Tiobe, Stack Overflow data. Obviously, we don't have the 65,000 devs that Stack Overflow has, but this is a start. And then just finally, I want to call out David Wheeler. In addition to using our personal and professional networks, Dave helped promote this survey, and we're really grateful for that. So moving right along, who took the survey and what did we find? Just again, to level set, these are some descriptive statistics. This was a very polyglot programming population. I think the average was 7.4 programming languages. By far, Python was the most widely used. Then we had some Shell, JavaScript, Java. And then we asked related questions about which package managers you use. Pip, of course, pip and PyPy were very significant, as was Anaconda, and then NPM and Maven, I think, was the next third or fourth most popular. Then we asked a two-part question, and this was sort of an instructional manipulation check just to see if survey participants were straight lining and clicking through. How many years have you been coding professionally, which is in blue here, and how many years have you been coding overall? And that included in schools and coding boot camps and the like. And this data too was fairly consistent with the Stack Overflow results, showing that something like 40% of developers today have less than a decade of experience under their belts. And I'll come back to this experience point in just a moment. Then two more demographic points, and then we'll dig into the results. We took an educational snapshot of our survey participants, and something like 95 or 96%. That's that orangish region of the chart here. 90 to 95% of our survey takers had a bachelor's degree or more. When you dig into the comparable Stack Overflow data, I think in Stack Overflow's case, it was 75% have a bachelor's or more. So that 20% difference in our cohort, our sample frame, I think just comes down to the fact that we used our personal networks to recruit survey takers. I think if we were going to do this again, we might invest more time in people who learn to code outside of school, so that we get a more representative sample in the future. So I just want to foot stomp that caveat. The world that IQT Labs has access to is not the world. And so we see evidence of sophistication in this population, but this is not the only form of sophistication. People learn how to code from all different sources of learning. And then just finally, when we asked about organizational size, you'll notice we drew the line here at schools and workplaces with a headcount of 50 or more. And that's an OECD econometric guideline that's used in a lot of micro and small enterprise studies. And so the bulk of our survey takers were at medium and large enterprises in the private and public sector. And so let me pause there to see if there are any questions. Otherwise, I will dig into what these folks told us. Okay, here, Amir, go ahead.
Oh, I was just in case someone had a question to raise their hand, but it looks like we're good.
Okay. So as I mentioned, we dug into these survey takers' self-reported behaviors and attitudes. So you've got to take that with a grain of salt. But one of the interesting questions was, which of the following support resources, if any, does your organization provide? Security training was present in about half the cases. In terms of policies governing package installs or warnings not to install untrusted packages, there were fewer survey takers who agreed with that. And then as we're working through our analysis, one of the things John Speed and I are doing is trying to see survey takers who had more than one of these organizational support resources in place, and using that sort of bare bones standard that ideally your organization is giving you the top 4 of these things: security training, putting policies in place, warning you to make sure you're not YOLO installing untrusted packages, and then potentially making available independent open source reviewers before you go and do something dangerous. I think the headline number is about 75% of our survey takers do not have more than one of these, and we take that as a call to action. These are things that public and private sector organizations can put in place, and we think if our data are at all suggestive, this is something to dig into in the future. And I'll say one more thing, about these organization-specific resources. You have to read this against the backdrop of the previous slide, on organization size. These are fairly large organizations, so more work has to be done in that area. When we ask survey takers what criteria they use to determine if a software package is safe to install, I'm just going to highlight the two salmon orange at the top. Package seems popular or trusted, and maintenance seems recent. Everybody on this call knows those are fairly superficial metrics. They don't necessarily tell you much about code provenance or finer-grained information. Source code is available for inspection, dependencies clearly listed. Those are also more informative as you head down. Only about a third of this population was actually checking for security advisories and CVEs. And then let me skip ahead just in the interest of time. I have 3 more slides for you. These are also sort of attitudinal ipsative data, digging into how often developers look to information sources. And then the next 2 slides are on a Likert scale, from strongly disagree to strongly agree with neutral in the middle. So just spending a little bit of time on this slide, how often do data scientists and software engineers use the following information sources? You'll notice the large green area next to a README. Seems that READMEs may be the port of first call. We know that intuitively. A smaller number of survey takers look to the Issues tab. Fewer still, that's that red area, never and seldom look at the actual source code themselves. And then probably one of our more disheartening results that maybe we can spend some time talking about is this last package scan item. Again, I know we don't have Stack Overflow's vast cross-section of the developer population, but if this is at all indicative, there are at least 2 conversations we can have about the low levels of reliance on package scans, at least among the well-educated population we were able to reach. And so we think this may have something to do with usability, investments in user research and in making package scan results clearer and more in your face. We might expect this pattern to shift in the opposite direction. So number 1, usability. Number 2, education. Consistent theme of this survey. So shifting from how often do you use the following information sources? And I apologize for the header here. This should be, to what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statements? I trust the code I reuse. That's the first line item here. Respondents overwhelmingly self-report high levels of trust in their code. I believe package registries are responsible for keeping code safe. Also, high levels of agreement, and we further dug into this in terms of respondents who agreed that package registries bear the responsibility along with individual developers, and there seems to be some view that this is a shared responsibility with individual developers, and we'll talk about that in the forthcoming blog post. I do not engage in pre-install code vetting, another rather alarming result that people I guess place their trust in our survey and we're willing to admit they strongly disagree with this statement. And then another sizable population only upgrading their dependencies if they contain critical vulnerabilities. And then I think this is the last slide I've just gotten to, and I apologize for the heading at the top. It should be, to what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statements? I wish I knew more about the vulnerabilities associated with code reuse. People who took our survey overwhelmingly agreed with that statement. And again, we read this cry for help, maybe putting it strongly, but a plea for further assistance, further educational resource, and more just learning on what the vulnerabilities are. And then I'll skip the I always check my code for credentials before commit. There's some evidence that this population here use GitHub more frequently. We're going to dig into statistical significance there. And finally, I'm comfortable evaluating a new library for security risks. Again, the fairly large number, just under half of the people who answered this question said they do not feel comfortable. And so more work to be done. I'm going to stop there, see if there are any questions, and stop sharing my screen. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, George. We had one comment. I don't know if we want to talk about it regarding package scans and how they can be difficult trying to fix vulnerable packages and transitive non-direct dependencies. John, do you want to talk about that comment, and maybe we can discuss it?
Yeah, I just saw one of the items in the graph was like fixing vulnerable packages or not even running and like audit, software on your stack and being like, oh, we're running vulnerable packages. And then from my experience running these like NPM audits or, REST cargo audits or whatever, and you're like, okay, cool, I have a vulnerable package, let me upgrade it. Oh, but it's in a dependency of mine. Okay, so let me go www.github.com/my-dependency over here, and then go through the whole motion of submitting a pull request, etc. And at the end of the day, like for move companies, maybe you would rather just be like, let me fork it and just change it so this dependency uses my new dependency that is fixed, and let me test it out here. And because I remember way back in the day, this was an issue with like Angular too, and there was like some nested like 5 levels deep vulnerability with like extracting zip files or tar archives or something crazy like that. And I asked one of my engineers I was working with to be like, hey, go fix this, let's see how deep it is. And he's like, no way, like we're just going to use this vulnerability. I mean, the vulnerability wasn't even really impactful too, which is another thing. It was like, hey, there is a vulnerability here, but it's not reachable in your current code. And that's another signal that is really important. Like I recently discovered CodeQL, and I was like, okay, so this path injection or this file path injection problem, it's not really user input control. I don't really have to worry. This is more for like static analysis tools, but the same principles kind of apply. It's like you have to verify that these are actual legit concerns for your particular use case. And right now, there's just a lot of false positives in the space. And even if there is a real positive, it's really hard to change if it's an indirect dependency. So like, I don't know, that's just, I think, a common problem for all of us here, maybe.
It's a great point. And, there were some items we didn't have time to get to, but we asked about, you talk about the frictions and the, pain points that devs have once those vulnerabilities have been flagged, once you've gone up your dependency chain. We asked about CLI versus GUI preferences, because there seems to be a generational component. There are developers who grew up entirely in the CLI, and there's sort of CLI purists. And the younger cohort that is out there installing packages all day long seem to consume their information through a GUI. Again, nothing here should shock this group, but it's a consideration when we think about alerting of vulnerabilities, when we think about information sharing, threat sharing, etc. And so another item that I didn't have time to specifically call out. One of the things we plan on doing, in this blog post shortly, is there seems to be a magic number, which is a decade of experience, or 9-point-something years of experience, where people who took this survey respond a little bit more cynically and respond a little bit more guardedly. And again, in this theme of education, of knowing your user, of trying to take all the brilliant work that has been done in CodeQL and SEML and things of that nature. There's a new generation of developers out there that need to be told this. And I know that's a very basic point, but it came through in our data.
By the way, I was going to chain off of what John said about, a lot of times you have high false positives, or you say, well, this is not really relevant to my code. I just went through this exact conversation yesterday, in fact, with a developer team who are looking at, I shouldn't probably say this out loud, looking at open CVs and their dependencies. And they were like, oh, this can't be exploited. And my observation was a lot of times developers are not the best ones to make that determination, right? They don't have the creativity, right? There's sort of this mindset difference between developers and hackers. It's just, people can't break what they make, really, or figure out how to. So anyway, that I was just going to, agree with you, but then you have the opposite problem where it's like, well, I can't see how this could actually affect me. Well, you suffer from a lack of imagination.
If I could actually jump in there, I agree 100%. The code flow capabilities of CodeQL make it more reasonable to say that this is a vulnerable dependency that is not in the call graph, starting from the app. It's infeasible to do it by hand. It's somewhat feasible to do it with tools. And what we found is that a significant portion, like double-digit percentages of dependencies in the transitive graph can be like shaken off if you can do that, because they are really detached from anything. And these are because they have these super libraries like crypto browserify that just include like every crypto thing. And the second thing is on the forking, we have I super strongly advocate like don't fork unless unless it's an incident or like you're really, really, really sure what you're getting into. And most teams don't want the technical debt of caring for this new thing that they've created. So there was a balancing there where security versus the debt or the risk that they will inherit it and then forget about it. And now you have a 14-year-old version of Angular that has been forked, so they can't change it, and they're paying for that over time.
Yeah, the cost of maintaining the fork can be expensive. Yeah.
I think.
Do we have any other questions or comments?
So I was just going to jump in a little bit on that. I think that while for platforms, particularly like JavaScript, where something that's not in your core graph may not end up in your target build, your comment is valid. There are languages where that's not the case, like Python, where a vulnerability in one of your dependencies you might not be calling, but an unknown vulnerability in something else that you are calling may enable people to call that. So it's not always the case that you can just eliminate something from your core graph and say you don't care anymore.
Yes, absolutely. And the whole like dynamic code, like there are lots of caveats to can't call it, but
it's the same argument that leads you to say, just because my program can't execute other programs doesn't mean that I should have arbitrary random stuff in my container with me.
Yeah.
I have a question on the presentation, and it's more of like extending the survey a little and wondering, especially with the CLI versus GUI tools, like, do you actually, maybe I missed it because I was a little late, but like, was there a slide showing like these are the tools that like certain people are using and you can like associate it with their demographic, whether it's like their age or their background or whatever, like they only use deps.dev or, like some GUI scorecard, something other, I don't know, SNCC or whatever, however you pronounce sneak or SNCC or whatever, you know what I mean though? Like what tools are people using, and does it correlate or correspond with like how they entered this space, whether they're like of a newer class or of an older class of folks who, older class people just were unfortunate to have shitty monitors and not good web browsers. Duh, that's why they don't like GUIs. But yeah, my question was like more like, what tools are people using, and is there any interesting info from that?
Yeah, so that was actually the last question on the survey. In terms of preferred interface, the only thing that stuck out like a sore thumb, and we're got to caveat this on statistical power, was that age factor. I think if we were to do a follow-up, we might list SEML, CodeQL, and these kind of tools, and try to get a sense of relative preference. But this was just an initial foray, just to see if, first of all, do trust-based attitudes prevail? To what extent? And that kind of floored us. And just people's candor and saying, no, I don't check. I don't look.
I trust strangers from the internet completely. Thank you.
Yes,
okay, dude. Like, whatever.
Right, and they were doing that with us with the survey, so it's consistent. But I just want to go to an earlier point. On the differences between NPM users and PyPy. That's another area that I don't know if John Speed is still on. I don't see him on one of the tiles, but we are very interested in these sort of cross-language ecosystem differences. And, because I think sometimes when we talk about package managers in the abstract, it really is apples, oranges, oil rigs, and chainsaws. And, there's a commensurability problem. And I think there are lessons the package managers can, the registry organizations themselves can teach each other. This is something we've talked about with Mike Scavetta, not to put you on the spot, Mike, but there's more to be done in that area, I think, is the short of it.
Yes, 100%. And I think the nice thing is that the package, for the most part, the package managers don't compete with each other. So there's no incentive for one of them to be secure and the other one not to be. It's just they're all on the same ship.
Cool. And kind of going along with that, George, so you mentioned there is a blog post coming out. Are there any other kind of things you're excited to do with this survey data, or kind of next steps that you're looking to do with this?
So I have to be careful what I promise here, but we're going to be making the data publicly available because I don't think I mentioned it in my spoken remarks, but we deliberately did not collect PII, which makes this process a lot easier, and I think that's part of the reason why we got more honest answers. So the data will be publicly available along with the blog post. I am actually the resident data visualization developer, and so we have a series of interactives that'll go along with this. And so if you're the TLDR type, the blog post gets a little dry on demographics. There will be some interactives accompanying it that you can check out, and John Speed and I will make sure that this group gets it. Because we had so much help with this survey, and we want to thank everybody who was a part of it. The other idea, and this is where I really have to be careful because this is not set in stone, is in the spirit of Stack Overflow. It might be interesting to come back to this population and try to get a bigger, more representative sample. Take feedback like the questions this group has posed on. Well, okay, now what scan tools are you using? There's some obvious follow-up. Another area, if I'm just being very honest, that we sort of omitted that might be worth digging into a little bit more is the containerization trend. So when we asked, what are you developing in, we left a free text section at the end, and a lot of folks wrote in, hey, I also use Docker. You didn't ask me about Docker. So, whether that's on par with something like Python, again, there's this commensurability problem where we're talking about package registries, language-based ecosystems. Everybody here knows what we're talking about, but we've got to be careful what we mix and what's in and what's out. But I think a future survey might take a broader view of these things.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I know the work group would be happy to have you back if you ever want to provide any updates, or if we can help spread the word in any way. That would be awesome.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing your space.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So do we have any other questions or comments for George or the presentation so far?
I was just going to echo what Amir says. Thank you. And yeah, definitely let us know how we can help too. I know in I think it was this working group when we were talking with the folks at Harvard Lish, we brainstormed like some ideas for survey questions and things like that. So if we can be helpful, as you think about the next version iteration of this, yeah, definitely let us know. Be cool.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, and as far as tools, OpenSSF is working on quite a few that will, I think, help in a lot of those pain points. Michael just shared one, the kind of like the beta. I think is that the reproducibility kind of measurement tool, Michael?
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Yep. So so I'd say also just be on the lookout for the tools coming out of this work group and the other work groups. I think they can help in a lot of ways. Awesome. So I think, oh wait, sorry. Okay, so next I think we have Kim, who's going to give us an update on security scorecards.
Speaking of tools, so the Scorecards project actually lives in the best practices working group, but I'm here today and, and I'm going to talk about it and give you all an update. This actually goes quite well with the survey we just saw. I think it was slide 13 that calls out a lot of these checks that the Scorecards project is doing. So I don't have slides, but this is a blog post we posted yesterday on the Google blog. So just a little background, Scorecards is an OpenSSF project that does a number of security checks given like a GitHub URL. And so it goes through, where is it? Yeah, so it's at OSSF/Scorecards. So you can see, a number of the security checks that it's running, and it returns either a true or false in a confidence level. So the update we posted yesterday. So we launched this back late last fall, and since then we've done a bunch of work. One is adding a bunch of new security checks. So now we have checks to see is there vulnerabilities based on our OSV tool? Are there binary artifacts in the repo? Are you freezing your dependencies? And I think a few other checks. Oh, like do you have Dependabot or RenovateBot turned on for the repo? And then I think a few more checks. And then an awesome thing is we now have data for over 50,000 repos. And so we're storing that in BigQuery. It's all publicly available and accessible, and you can query the data. We'd like to scale that even further. We keep bumping into GitHub API limits. So we would like to try to keep going. We're all sort of sharing tokens right now. And then here's a really cool graphic, like looking at those 50K projects, kind of like how they're stacking up. You'll see a lot of these checks, that we're looking for were actually in George's deck. And so you can see there's a lot of red in the graph. We need to work as an industry to get more green on these graphs. And then there's a couple of case studies, like the Envoy project was one early one that picked up on the Scorecards project and has been iterating against their own dependency policy for how they're approaching if developers want to introduce new dependencies into the Envoy project, and how they're using the scorecards to help mitigate some of the risks there. And then we improved our own scorecard for Scorecards, so dogfooding our own stuff. We're pinning dependencies now, and we have a security policy in the repo that tells people who to email if you find vulnerabilities. And of course, we've expanded the community. Azim's on the call, who's been driving a lot of this work, and Naveen, he was here, I think he left. We have a standing meeting now for just the Scorecards team that's on the OpenSSF public mailing or public calendar. And I think there's a Slack as well. And so a couple of the upcoming things that we are looking into. Oh, Michael, you just reminded me. Where is it? We're also showcasing the scorecards data. I don't even know where it is, but on the metrics.OpenSSF dashboard that Michael's been driving is pulling in that data, and also the recently announced deps.dev dashboard that was announced through Google. That's pretty cool to check out. And so upcoming, these are some of the bigger things that we want to add is have like GitHub badges for scorecards, some more integration with CI/CD tooling, and then integration with this other new project in OpenSSF called All-Star. And so we've been working on this All-Star project to actually try to help enforce some of these security checks. So I can't remember, we did a quick presentation in one of these working groups about All-Star, but it's like a GitHub app that you have to go install. So we can't install it in everyone's repositories, but it's trying to do, some of the enforcement of these security checks, and then like opening issues, or like trying to like turn on the check where it's possible. So so that's the update on scorecards. We love to get more feedback, get more folks involved, all of the above.
Hey, this is really great work, Kim. Thanks for sharing with us. I think that's really really very cool. Can I couple of like questions, comments?
Yeah.
And when I took a look at what the previous scorecard system was recording, it looked a little bit to me like it was somewhat unreliable as to, okay, we might have started a badging at some point, maybe 4 years ago, but didn't really complete it, but we got thumbs up for starting it. Or it felt a little bit like somewhat unreliable in terms of the results. And then so that was just an impression. Is that backed up by data? And then we looked at a few projects that looked good from the old scorecard system, and then it was like, well, that doesn't match reality. As in we looked at a specific project and how it scored and what we knew about the project, right? So I guess the question is, I mean, all this is good. Don't take this as anything other than just just asking a question. Is did you sort of sample and look at it and go, oh yeah, this is spot on, indicating a problem with a particular package. We know that one's actually super bad. Or, the other one where it's like, good score, but anyway, that's the question.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned there is a confidence value that's coming across through each of the security checks. I would say, I mean, there's always room for improvement. I'm not sure, Azim, if you can speak to some of the things we've done there. Maybe you dropped off. I don't know. Oh no, there you are. But yeah, I think what's helpful, like some projects have said, hey, the score is a little bit wrong. Like, did you file an issue? Tell us about it, and then we can make improvements that way too. But it's hard, we're just doing this. The thing about scorecards is we want it to be completely automated. So, so there's no humans involved really, but obviously like it could use a lot of tweaking and.
Well, I mean, there's biases in any automated tools as much as you'd like it to be, purely, objective oftentimes. And it's oftentimes not even like the survey showed. Some people trust, something, and then it's like, anyway, sorry.
Yeah. I think an active discussion going on too is, and maybe there, again, Azim might be able to speak to someone of this too, is like, there are different security checks that organizations or people feel like that are more important than others. So coming up with a way to sort of weight your own checks against, the full result, because, maybe being an active project is more important to you than something else. And so giving folks the ability to sort of tweak their own enforcements based on different tiers or of what they think is secure is another, I think, topic for discussion. Azim, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think I just want to add there that so right now, at least for V2, we have been focusing more on the breadth of scorecards, like how Kim mentioned. We are trying to add more checks. We are trying to add more repos. But yeah, of course, we need to also look into how to improve each of these qualities and how to go into like the depth aspect of it. So for example, like frozen dependencies is a very good example. Like right now we are looking at frozen dependencies in like Docker files and things like that. But there's so many ways that you can add these dynamic dependencies, like for example inside Python or something of the sort. So we are doing this case by case basis. So I do agree that it's not like 100% spot on, but like some checks we know we are doing it right. Like for example, we can very easily check if a repository is active or not, or if people are from multiple orgs are contributing to this repository or not. So some of these things we are definitely spot on, but things like frozen dependencies, whether they're using dependabot to update their dependencies, I think there is always going to be some amount of confidence score there that we are going to rely on. So yeah, so that's kind of where I think the community will help, where people can say, hey, look, there's this tool also, so maybe Scorecard should like look into that along with the tools that you're already checking. So yeah.
I have a quick question. Are the scorecards and the criticality score related in any way?
They're decoupled projects, but the original way we were looking at this is, hey, there's a whole lot of open source projects in the world. Like, we need to help fix them. We can't boil the entire ocean. So how do we start reasoning about, the most critical projects first? And so that was sort of the inspiration for the criticality score project. And we should probably give an update on that. I'm not sure like what's actually been happening on that side of things, but yeah, like just trying to get some sort of like narrow down the problem space, if you will, is
Totally
kind of what, as you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why did you have a like specific idea or like question? Curious.
Not in particular, no. I'm just trying to. Sometimes I try and think of ways where, things can be integrated together, kind of like how the metrics project could integrate some of the data from security scorecard, or I'm sorry, from criticality score, for example. But yeah, nothing in particular came to mind.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. Like almost a check for it's hard because they're all Boolean, but like a check for if we think it's like a critical project or with some sort of confidence. I don't know.
Yeah.
Scorecards even, or you're going to be in big trouble if there's an attack on this repo. True or false?
I feel like it'd be cool to run like a criticality score on your internal projects and be like, for company X, what are your critical open source projects?
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't think that's quite. I haven't checked criticality score in a while, but I feel like it's just grabbing all projects because Google things. But I had comments on the scorecard. I've been using it last couple of months, and then this last week we got like a open source fix it sprint to do, and so me and my team have really been using this. And I noticed back in the day with like the DM repo, it wasn't like catching static code analysis because of course they're doing static code analysis for the REST project in like kind of a unique way. And it gave me two thoughts. One was that like, man, I wish I could file a ticket right now and send it straight to OSSF from my command line client because I still haven't gone to the GUI master race yet. And so, just like command line, oh, this is a false positive. Like there actually is static analysis and it sends an issue nicely formatted, almost like a Red Hat bug report, And so if that's a project you guys would love help with, I would love to do something like that because I'm lazy. The second one is more of like hey, I've come across an open source project and, it's doing the static code analysis or it's doing X or Y or Z. But for some reason, OSSF Scorecard isn't actually like detecting that. And in the interim, while we fix the scorecard issue or while we like improve the detectors for upstream scorecard, let's have like a cheat.txt file or something that says passes CI/CD, for OSSF Scorecard, almost like a exclude or like a, hey, it's an issue upstream. It's not an issue with this project, like we are doing this and like here's the commit message with the detailed proof. So like add a scorecard dot exceptions or scorecard dot whatever and be like, we actually are doing static analysis for this project, or we do have like signed releases. I don't know why signed releases wouldn't show up, but you see where I'm saying, like have that cheat sheet or that cheat.md file for like scorecard.md file or something, just in case Scorecard isn't detecting for whatever reason, because there's a lot of custom implementations of blah, and we can't detect all of those implementations. It's just not a fun problem to solve for.
Yeah, I like those ideas. Jeff, you pasted something. Is that for doing like the issues on the fly?
Oh, this is the GitHub CLI. Yeah, so I can integrate it with CLI. I mean, the thing is with OSSF Scorecard, I already think I have my GitHub token exposed. So it could just be like, do you agree with these results? Kind of a question mark, with the cute little emoji at the end. And then you say yes or no, and you can have like an interactive thing, or you can just do for scripting where it doesn't do like a user input thing, but you see kind of how it's all integrated in the scorecard. So like, yeah, we can, and you can make issues once you have a GitHub token. You're like assuming that privilege is there, you should be able to spawn an issue. But
yeah,
I
feedback
definitely
loop
like
of some kind makes sense in some way.
Because people will use Scorecard and they'll be too lazy to create an issue, because then you have to go and you have to figure out how that organization crafts their issues and what information you should include, and it's like one-click stop. That's the people we typically deal with in my society. So maybe like if we provide that, and I'm making a suggestion with the intent of like being able to apply engineering time to help with that. So if you all are interested, we can file an issue.
Yeah, I definitely like the CLI idea. I think that'll be very helpful to get some feedback on corner cases where we are either showing false positive or false negatives. And yeah, that'll be useful to get some data, and then we can add these in our test case and then try to work around that.
Yeah, so please create an issue. That'd be great.
Yeah, we'll do.
Awesome. Michael, did you have a question and comment?
Oh, just saying that as far as like correcting or augmenting or commenting on data, it could be done in the dashboard. We talked about making that more of a read-write thing. Obviously, that doesn't benefit people that don't use the dashboard, so it's a trade-off, but it's another option, I guess.
Is that through like issues, or how are you?
We're not doing it today, but what we're envisioning is kind of an overlay on top of the data, so that if Scorecard thinks that something is true, but someone knows better, it can be set to false. And so, and then it's how are people going to abuse that function, and how do we check it, and who do we have, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But which is kind of why we haven't done anything, because those are like need people problems.
Yeah. Cool.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Kim, for that update on the security scorecard. Does anyone have any other questions for Kim about that, or anything else related to those projects?
Yeah, just a quick question regarding scorecard. Is there any plans for a scorecard badge in order to encourage open source projects to consider this scorecard seriously, right? So, they can have a badge in their README file or something like that. Their score is really good or something like that.
Yeah,
that's one of the issues. Oh, go ahead, Azim.
Sorry. Yeah, like I think Kim mentioned that. So it's already in our blog post. Also, it's something that's on our roadmap, and hopefully in the next quarter we are going to try and implement that.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Are we going to end up with badge inception, where Scorecard has a badge that includes whether or not you've got a best practices badge, and best practices requires that you're in Scorecard?
Probably.
Cool. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for the questions and comments. I think maybe for the last couple minutes, one thing that worked well last time was if the representative or someone who wants to talk about it is here, maybe getting some updates on some of the projects and efforts and initiatives that we've been working on. So we got a little bit of it, but we got the scorecard update. Do we have any updates on the Criticality score project that anyone would want to talk about or provide? Okay.
I don't see anyone here, I don't think.
Okay, and then I think with what's it called? package feeds as well. I believe it's Jordan. Is he here, or anyone want to give an update on package feeds? No? Okay. One quick update we have from OSTIF, the Open Source Technology Improvement Fund. It's a pretty tangentially related update on some work we just did recently. Derek, do you want to just give a quick update to the work group on that?
Sure. I will actually just link the research in the chat since we are very short on time. We did a project with the Linux Foundation and the Trail of Bits on their release signing policies and procedures. There were some interesting things in there, such as people who have access to signing keys not having a smart card. And there was a lengthy debate about whether we should be using touch-activated devices or not, because that eliminates a class of problems where you just keep your smart card in your computer at all times. It's not really providing any security in that case if your computer gets compromised, because they always have access to it. Whereas a touch-activated device, you have to actually be physically present to touch it in order to sign something. So that was an interesting result. And we talked pretty extensively about it because there is no open source touch activated key that is reproducible that meets all of those requirements. So we have the Nitro key, which is not touch activated, but meets all of the other requirements. And then we have smaller projects like Only Key that are touch activated, but are missing drivers or other issues. So we are now working with the Linux Foundation to try to find a solution for that.
Cool. Yes, and the full research report could be found there. So if you have any questions about that or want to discuss it at an upcoming meeting, feel free to let us know. It was more of a policy kind of IT audit review as opposed to kind of a traditional kind of manual source code review, which yielded slightly different results. But regardless, I think the results were good, and we were able to have a body of research that can be built on top of and referred to for future use and future development in kernel release signing. So that was awesome. And then going along with that, we actually currently have a proposal being reviewed and voted on by OpenSSF's TAC, where we were essentially offered a grant of 60,000, and we have essentially proposed doing Symfony, a thorough audit review of Symfony with that grant specifically. So that is currently being reviewed and voted on. If you have any questions about that or want to discuss it, feel free to let us know. You can drop me, myself, or Derek an email. Or if you want to review that proposal, we have that as well. But hopefully we'll know more about that soon, and we'll actually be able to, through OpenSSF specifically, be able to show what we do in securing critical projects, and hopefully we can do that starting with Symfony. So, looks like we got some recommendations on, okay, so different types of keys. Good, very good. Yeah, so those were my updates. Does anyone else have any other updates in the last couple minutes? Anything that anyone wants to talk about, maybe for a future meeting? Cool, okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming today, and thank you to our presenters for the updates. There's the Slack channel as well. So if anything that you'd like to discuss with the work group offline, the Slack channel I think is a good avenue for that as well as getting involved with the email lists, and participating is very easy. So how do I get into Slack? I'm just learning how Slack works, but I'm fairly certain you just you add the OpenSSF workspace, and in that you can join the different subtopics, such as this work group has a separate link. But yeah, I'm not too good at Slack myself. I'm just learning it. To me, it's just glorified AIM from back in the day, but I will send a link to the Slack information for you now, John. Cool. All right. And with that, thanks again, everybody. Have a great 4th of July holiday. Oh, Michael sent it. Thank you, Michael. So I think you go through that link and you can get involved with Slack. And yeah, have a great 4th of July weekend for everyone celebrating, and have a great weekend, and looking forward to the next one. All right.